California Association of Food Banks. Thanks for joining our webinar. Today we are having this call to talk about recent improvements to CalFresh around student eligibility at colleges and universities. So we have about 100 people registered. I think some folks are still joining us, but we're going to go ahead and get started. And today we will be hearing from, hang on one sec, some technical difficulties. Today we'll be hearing from Jessica Bartholow with the Western Center on Law and Poverty, Dave Badal from the California Department of Social Services, Kevin Aslanian from the Coalition of California Welfare Rights Organizations, and Sarah Palmer DeFrank from the California Association of Food Banks. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jessica. Jess, are you there?
Hi, I'm here.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, great. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. This is Jessica Bartholow with the Western Center on Law and Poverty, and I just want to say thank you to the California Association of Food Banks for putting together and hosting the call, and not just this call, but all the calls that you do to help the SNAP and CalFresh community understand up-and-coming changes or hard-to-remember rules for the CalFresh program. Really appreciate it. You know, today's call is about student eligibility. And this is one of the areas where there's a lot of exciting things going on, and led by the Department of Social Services. And you know, Western Center on Law and Poverty is just happy to be part of it. So one of the most important changes that is happening to the program is a result of a piece of legislation, AB 1930. It was a bill that was sponsored by Western Center on Law and Poverty, and co-sponsored with CCWRO, Coalition of California Welfare Rights Organizations. You know, we came at this bill as a sponsor for the bill because not only because we had seen many low-income, hungry college students unable to meet the work rule, especially during the recession, or at no fault of their own, but also because we know that hunger is prevalent on college campuses across the state of California from several surveys that have been done, and that not having access to food is a significant barrier to completing your college. And for low-income people, low-income youth coming out of poverty, college is identified as one of the leading ways to exit poverty. So not only is hunger among college students inhumane, right, because hunger really shouldn't be an experience that anybody has, but hamper people's future opportunities. And so these two things together, to us, really represented a paramount issue that should be addressed. And you know, we're so grateful that Assemblymember Nancy Skinner agreed to author the bill and led it through to the governor's desk, and very grateful that the governor signed it. So let's talk about a minute about what the bill did. Under federal law, the people who are participating in educational opportunities, a college where you need a high school degree or GED to participate, are limited to participation in CalFresh if they're enrolled in school part-time or more. They intend to enroll in the coming semester. Of exemptions to those rules, and they're already in place. And there are some additional exemptions to the rule that the state of California hadn't yet exercised. And this is because in the federal law, it's, they are established as exemptions only if the state of California identifies them as an exemption. And so what 1930 did was simply say that the state of California shall identify certain programs that are state-funded employment training programs, or that would meet the qualifications under the CalFresh ENT program. And by identifying those programs, the state of California will be able to broaden the list of low-income students who would be eligible for CalFresh through an exemption of the 20-hour work rule. This policy, that are being implemented, they 1930 through 1930 will have to be implemented by the 1st of October. But the great that the Department of Social Services CalFresh Bureau has already convened several work group meetings and has begun issuing guidance to implement the policy in advance of the deadline. The other thing that's happened as a result of these conversations around 1930 is that the department has identified other places where the safety net for low-income students is not, maybe has too many holes. And so in addition to issuing probably more than one ACL that implement 1930, and I'll talk about that later, they've also planned to be implementing or sending out all-county guidance that helps to close and narrow the opportunities for students to fall through the cracks, students who are already exempt or qualify for an exemption to the student work rule. So this is really exciting for me professionally, because I was a student who was poor and my family was homeless when I was in college, and so I know what it's like to be hungry as a college student and to be food insecure, and it does impact your ability to succeed in the class environment and excel there. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who is helping to implement this and who will help get the word out as we get through the fall, so that students in our college campuses are no longer hungry. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Jess. I want to, before Dave goes, I want to let everybody know that you can submit questions on your GoToWebinar panel. On the side panel under questions, you can just go ahead and type your questions in, and then we'll go ahead and pose your questions to the speakers. We'll go ahead and pose your questions to the speakers. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, this is David Badal from the CalFresh Social Services. And we share Jessica's and Stephanie's and Kevin's and everything that we're making good progress on chipping away at an old piece of legislation that I believe goes back to 1977 at the federal level, which did present a lot of obstacles for students to become eligible for SNAP, CalFresh in California. So as we'll say, we're very AB 1930 was chaptered into law with an effective date of October 1, and it requires the department, CDSS, to consult with representatives from the offices of the Chancellor of Community Colleges, the California State University and UCD, as well as the California Workforce Investment Board, county social service agencies, and advocates for students and clients to try to identify any of these potential exemptions for the student rules. Essentially, the student rules say that anyone who is age 18 through 49 enrolled in an institution of higher education as defined in both federal and state regulations is ineligible for CalFresh unless they meet one of a certain number of exemptions. And Jessica referenced that there are exemptions that currently exist in our regulations, and we are probably within the next few days, hopefully, it's going through final review, getting an all-county information notice sent out to counties to remind county eligibility staff that when someone identifies or is identified as a student, it is imperative that the counties explore each of these exemption possibilities so that we can make sure that, to use Jessica's term, none of these students fall through the cracks. If they meet one of these exemptions, we want them to be on the program. AB 1930 did expand the possibilities for us in terms of the employment training exemption. We did issue on September 17th of this year All County Letter 1570, which is available on our website. It identifies the Workforce Innovative Opportunity Act, which used to be the Workforce Investment Act, which used to be the Job Training whatever JTPA, Job Training Partnership, as well as the EOPS program as programs that do qualify for the employment and training exemption. We have been meeting with the work group as mandated by the legislation on a fairly regular basis. We're going to be probably ratcheting it up starting in the next couple of months to try to meet a little more regularly. What the chancellor's offices have been tasked with is trying to identify the programs that they have at the different institutions that would possibly qualify for these exemptions. Once we receive that information from the chancellor's office, from the academic institutions, we will then be clearing these through the United States Department of Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Service, which is our oversight federal agency, to make sure that these programs are do in fact comply with the federal requirements. And at such point as we identify additional programs, we will be sending out additional all-county letters identifying these programs. We're also in the process of trying to develop a protocol because this is going to be a fairly large list of programs, of how we're going to keep this thing updated, how we're going to communicate this to the counties, and how such a list will be maintained so that eligibility staff have something like a desk guide sitting there, so that if a client identifies as being involved in one of these programs, they'll know that they do in fact meet one of the exemptions. Another thing we're doing right now is trying to work out some kind of a verification form as needed for a student to take to WIOA, EOPS, or whatever program that they'll be involved in, whether that be through the school, through the admissions office, through the actual ENT program, to provide verification if it's needed. We don't have to mandate the use of such a form. It'll be helpful in certain circumstances, but students can also sign an affidavit in lieu of any other kind of verification. So in a nutshell, that's where we're going. We're excited. We think we're going to be able to identify hopefully quite a few more programs and get a lot of these students onto CalFresh, getting them the nutrition security that they need. And it's going to be an ongoing process. As was mentioned, the first salvo with HCL for 1570 was effective October 1 of this year. We anticipate probably at least one, probably I would guess more than one letters coming out in the future as we identify these additional programs. So that's all I've got.
Thanks, Dave. It doesn't look like we have any questions for you yet, so we'll go ahead and turn it over to Kevin with a quick reminder to everybody that if you have questions, type them in. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Kevin Aslanian. I'm with the Coalition of California Welfare Rights Organizations. I've been doing welfare rights for 2 centuries. I've seen a lot of students who are hungry. Recently, there was an article in LA Times, I believe, that talked about 50,000 students in California go to school hungry, starving. And I think people should know that anybody has a right to apply for CalFresh food stamps at any time, and they could get expedited service. In an expedited service, all you have to show is your identity. All you have to prove is your identity. And a lot of the students could get expedited services, so at least they could eat for a couple months. Meanwhile, there are certain ways that the students could prove that they're eligible for CalFresh. One of the ways is to show that they're eligible for work study, and they could do that by getting verification of their student aid award. If they get a student aid award, that shows that they're eligible for work study. The other ways.
This is Dave. Can I interject real quick? I don't know if you were going to get to this point or not. This is David, CDSS. A student has to be eligible in terms of being registered for work study. They do not actually have to be working. That's a clarification. There's a lot of times we have situations where there's no work available, there's no jobs available, but a student has been designated as work study eligible. That person is eligible to meet the work study exemption. So I just wanted to add that point.
Yeah, thank you. And And so, I mean, it's just about anybody who gets a Pell Grant is also eligible for work studies. So when you go out to the schools to do outreach, you can find a lot of hungry students who are eligible for work study, and that doesn't mean that they're getting that they're doing the work study, because often when people, I mean, just because there's a work study, it's hard to get a slot. But as long as you're eligible for work study, you can get CalFresh food stamps. And the other exemption is if you're participating in a Perkins program. If the program in school that you're getting also has Perkins benefits, is Perkins, called Perkins 4, then those folks are also eligible. But the point basically is, if somebody's hungry, you should have them apply for expedited service, and if they don't get expedited service, you can always go to our webpage, ccw.org, and ask for an expedited state hearing. And you can fill out that form, ask for an expedited state hearing, so they can get their food stamps. And again, they're supposed to get that food stamps on the date of application, but no later than the next 3 days. If anybody has any questions, we'll be glad to answer the questions after Sarah.
Before we turn it over to Sarah, Kevin, could you just say your website one more time?
ccwro.org.
Thanks.
And
All right, well, go ahead.
I also have a temporary student verification form on our webpage, on the forms for that people could use to verify that they are work study.
Thank you. So if you have questions, keep typing them in. We've got a couple, and we'll go ahead and take questions after Sarah. All right.
Well, hi, everyone. This is Sarah Palmer DeFrank with the California Association of Food Banks, and I am leading the charge with the County Advocate Program through the Alliance to Transform CalFresh. I just wanted to talk to you briefly about some opportunities that might be available to you in participating with this group. Issues like the ones we're talking about today are our primary concern, and increasing the level of excellence throughout the entire CalFresh program is our aim. So just a brief overview. This year we kind of laid the tracks for this program, and quite frankly, it's been a wonderful start, but we still have a lot of work to do. So we've trained quite a few advocates throughout the state. We're certainly planning to come back around and spend some more time with folks who have already been trained, who have additional members that they might want to bring into the fold. We are promoting the CalFresh Excellence Pledge, and we have over 30 signatures representing 20 counties. The pledge is essentially saying that we stand together in an excellent CalFresh program, and that we would like to be at the top 10 in the nation for CalFresh participation or SNAP participation, and or above 75%. So please join us in that. Beyond that, some things that you can look forward to in CAP participation is a lot of peer-to-peer networking. So one of the challenges with being in a state this large and also having a county-administered CalFresh program is that we often don't get a chance to talk to our local county advocates and see what other counties are doing well and where they might need help. So I think this is a great opportunity for everyone to share their own knowledge and resources in that way. So please stay tuned for upcoming opportunities to participate in the County Advocate Program. And if you have any questions, please do contact me at Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, at cafoodbanks.org. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sarah. We are going to go ahead and jump into Q&A. Let me get the questions. So, Dave and Kevin, you already touched on this, but could you reiterate whether people need to have a work-study job in order to qualify or in order to be exempt from the student rules?
Yeah, this is David. I do want to reiterate, there is no requirement that the student be working. We have received responses from the USDA to specific questions we've asked on that subject. There's really not national consensus on this. We've got, when I was doing research, I did find that in some other, they actually were requiring that the student be working. So we have it in writing from FNS that is, if the student is enrolled in work study, whether or not there's a job available for them or not, they are eligible under the work study exemption. So they're eligible to participate in CalFresh.
And this is Jessica. I don't know if I can step in here, but you know, the reasoning behind that, if people maybe can understand, is that what I've learned about work study is that financial eligibility for work study doesn't mean that you'll actually be awarded a slot, and the reason for that is because it's woefully underfunded. Kevin and I were just at a meeting with the community colleges, and they said for every 1 million people who are financially eligible and verified eligible for work study, only about half of them actually get a slot. And so the distinction between being financially eligible for a work study and actually getting a slot has nothing to do with whether or not the student's low income and struggling and needs a slot or even wants a slot, and more to do with whether or not the funding has run out for them.
Actually, the reason for that is there's an indication that the student is willing to work. So if they're willing to work, then they can eat. So that's why they have that rule.
And if this is David, if you run into any obstacles with counties where they're saying no, that's that kind of that person is not eligible because they don't actually have work, please encourage that, either through the panelists here or through the county, they have a way to contact us and we can clarify this point for them.
Yeah, in fact, if anybody, CCWI would be glad to represent anybody at a hearing who has a problem with this. You could do an expedited hearing. And
we won't have to get to that point because it's we have issued multiple in letters and in multiple policy interpretation documents that we've sent out to all 58 counties that these students are in fact eligible for CalFresh.
Yeah, but it won't hurt to. It's always good to ask for a hearing because that way, they understand what the rule is, and then they will contact you and resolve the hearing.
Yeah, ultimately, no matter how we get there, that's where we want to get to, is getting them eligible.
Just want to make sure people eat. So,
speaking of the rules, is there a place where folks can go to get a copy of the new EOPS exemption rules? We have somebody who'd like to give them to their local college.
This is Jessica Bartholow at Western Center on Law Poverty. I believe that LISNIC has made that new ACL available on their guide, but also it's available on the Department of Social Services website. If people don't know it, perhaps David could give the URL for that website, and you should really get to know. They have a very easy to use page that has all the guidance. All county letter guidances and all county information notices guidances, and you can immediately download anything made available there. David, do you have the URL?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to it right now. One problem I'm having is I can't open the letter on our website myself right now.
What's the phone number, David?
What I can do is I can send the link out to Stephanie, and Stephanie, can you distribute it?
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
All right, so let's move along. If a student's financial award letter states that they received the Pell Grant but doesn't show work study eligibility, will they be eligible for CalFresh?
Well, I mean, as to whether or not the Pell Grant itself meets one of the other exemptions?
Yes.
Well, I'm not 100% sure that that in and of itself satisfies the exemption. Kevin, Jess, do you have anything to support saying that it does?
But we think from the information that anybody who gets a Pell Grant is automatically eligible for work study. The issue is whether or not they applied for work study when they filled out the application for work study, for financial assistance. So for those people, I would ask for a hearing. I would also go back to the school and find out how come I can't get something showing that I'm eligible for work study. I want to apply for work study right now, and then I want to get something showing that I'm eligible for work study.
Yeah, so if that's the way to it, that's great. But other than what Kevin's talking about, if a Pell Grant does in fact automatically confer work study eligibility, then that's a good way to go. But other than that, just the receipt of a Pell Grant by itself does not satisfy any of the other student exemptions. No.
Okay, thank you. We have somebody who heard that college students, under these new rules, college students only need to document that they're taking classes that are preparing them for a job in order to qualify for exemption from the student rules. Does anybody want to address that?
Well, I'm not really sure I understand the question. What I was speaking to earlier is that student status is not a mandatory verification. I mean, it's a mandatory requirement for verification, but verification can be provided through self-certification, an affidavit. If a student cannot acquire something from the actual institution, verifying that they are in one of these programs, they can self-certify to that.
Yeah, I think that this is a new program, and there's going to be a lot of questions like that. So if somebody is taking like woodwork or some kind of a trade, they should be eligible. And if they're not, again, ask for a hearing, contact us, and we should be able to make sure that they get their food stamps.
So I think maybe to clarify though, just documenting that you're taking classes that prepare you for a job isn't enough to exempt you from the student rules, correct?
I guess in part it depends on what kind of a job, okay?
And what kind of a program, and that's, as I was referencing earlier, we're going to have to be running, we do have the Federal Oversight Agency, we do distribute exclusively federal dollars, so we do have to make sure that programs that we include students participating in certain kind of programs, we have to make sure that those do fall under the federal guidelines.
So it sounds like that may be a to be determined or a to be continued topic.
Well,
it's been part of the discussion at the work group. I mean, the point is, there's taking college classes. They are helping prepare themselves for employment. Kevin has made that point very clearly in the work group, and as I said, there's a lot of merit to it. But we do have to ensure that FNS goes along with our interpretation of the rules. So it is kind of an ongoing process.
Great, thank you.
And Stephanie, I want to make sure that people understand, if a person needs it, they should apply. You should never tell someone not to apply because maybe this doesn't qualify or does qualify.
Absolutely.
The censorship would qualify.
Thank you. If a student is on a waiting list for work study, does this qualify the student?
Yes, because you don't have to be having a slot. You only have to be eligible. The only way you could be on the waiting list is by being eligible.
Well, let me clarify from CDSS's perspective. I'm not really sure there are. I mean, a waiting list for a job. Is that what we're talking about?
It's unclear.
Like they've been determined eligible for work study, but there's no work available, so they're on a waiting list. If that's the case, yes, definitely they're eligible. If it's someone that's not, they have to have been determined, though, to be work-study eligible to qualify.
Yeah, and there is no waiting list for work study. I mean, there's no work-study eligibility waiting list. You apply.
Yeah, it would just be for the employment itself, and in that case, yes, they are definitely eligible.
And related to that, so people can be on the waiting list, or not the waiting list, but can be out looking for a job for months, and there's no cap on how long they have to find a job. Is that correct?
That's true. Absolutely. You just have to be eligible for work study. You do not have to be working.
Right. The institution will provide an award letter saying you have been found, you know, I don't know what it says, but it essentially says you are now eligible for work study. That's all that's needed. They do not have to be working. There's no time frame on that. We've had situations where in some of the communities that were certainly more impacted by the recent recession, where there was very few work-study jobs available, those students are still eligible for the program because they are work-study eligible.
Thank you. So for a student who is self-certifying that they are work-study eligible, what sorts of things do they need to, how do they do that, or what do they need to
study, self-certifying for work study, that's kind of iffy. I mean, they should have an award letter for that.
Okay. Already answered that one. And there's a question about income guidelines. For these folks that we're talking about, their income guidelines are the same as everybody else's, correct?
Yes.
All right. So that.
This is just, I want to add one thing about income guidelines for this population, and that's that, you know, our Department of Social Services, CalFresh Bureau, took a leadership role about a year and a half ago now to submit a waiver to the federal government to allow for the averaging of the 20 hours a week work. And so if we haven't had a chance to talk about that yet, it is important to know that, you know, the 20 hours a week is not actually a strict 20 hours a week. If you work 10 hours one week, maybe because of, you know, scheduling practices of your company, you received less than you had asked for in work. If you're able to, you know, over time have an average of 20 hours a week with the waiver requested by DSS and approved by the USDA, that suffice. And I don't know if David wants to take a second and speak about that, but in case that people don't recognize that that is our policy in the state of California, I thought we should mention it.
That is definitely a waiver that we received. We've received an extension for it, and it's an indefinite waiver, which means that at some point there's going to be federal statute or federal regulations that say that an average of 20 hours a week suffices in terms of meeting the 20-hour per week requirement. You know, we have issued that in a letter at some point in the past. I don't have it at my fingertips, but there's no anticipation that that's going to end. That 20-hour average or 80-hour per month average is in place. So if a student is working, you know, 15 hours one week and 25 the next, and 15 the next, and 25 the next, they are not ineligible because during that 15-hour week they didn't meet the 20-hour average or the 20-hour minimum.
Thank you. Sarah, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in my experience as both a SNAP recipient and a recipient of work study, I found the application for work study to be quite easy to navigate. So most of you will probably already have folks who have applied and been deemed eligible, but just a little piece of knowledge that might help some folks along. It's actually not a very arduous process to apply for work study.
It must not be, because I did it.
All right, so back to our questions. There's a question about whether work-study income counts as income for eligibility determination. Anybody want to take that?
I believe it's excluded, but that's off the top of my head. I'd have to do a little digging. So if you want to move on to another question, I can be looking that up.
Great.
Just is that countable?
I'm sorry. What was the countable? What was the question?
Work-study income countable income?
The question is whether work-study income is counted as income.
I believe it is. Well, I know that under the CalFresh program it is not. Let's wait for David to look it up.
I'm pretty sure the answer is.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I think the answer is no, but let's get, yeah.
I'm looking.
Okay.
Next
All right,
question.
so we have another question. The question is a student living at home who has low income and is going to school and is eligible for work study and Pell Grants, and they're not 22, can they still get CalFresh if they're buying and preparing separately?
No, because they're under 20. They're under 22, so therefore they have to be a member of the household that they're living in. If that's their
if they're living at home and their family's not eligible, I wouldn't say no automatically. I would say let's see if their family's eligible and process their income. But if their family is not low income and they are purchasing and preparing their food with their family who is not low income, then I would say no, they're not eligible, and I would ask why would they need it.
Right.
So if there's a reason why they need food, because they can't afford it, then there's something else going on if their family's not low income.
So they look at they cannot be a separate household because they're under 22, even if they're a student.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
In our regulations under Manual Policy and Procedure 63502.137, this earned income shall include work-study income which has not been excluded by federal statute as specified in, let me move on.
All right, so while we're still looking that up, if anybody else has other questions, go ahead and type them in. There's a clarification for you guys while Dave's looking that up. And the clarification is a student that is 18, not living at home, may be eligible for CalFresh. Correct? Without having to, I guess it's without having to take their family's income into consideration.
Yes.
Great. Let's see, there's also a request for email addresses, and I can, I'll talk to folks and we'll do a follow-up email where there'll be a recording of this webinar, and also we'll have a link to Kevin's website. There are lots of questions about what exactly that was, and then also a link to the recent ACL.
And this is Jeff.
This is Dave. I'll be sending that Stephanie to distribute, but I do want to restate that work-study income is considered earned income.
Okay,
there's no exclusions for that in our regulations or the federal regs.
Okay. I do want to mention that we really appreciate, I appreciate if people want to send questions. Please don't be shy to send us questions. It does help us identify challenges to the policy, to implementing the policy, and understand what students are going through. The laws that we're implementing through AB 1930 and through the work group are new policies that we would have only identified were needed because of requests for assistance. So please reach out if needs more clarification.
And if anybody needs help, just call me up, and you guys can call me on my cell phone. My cell phone is on our webpage.
So we have another question. Has the state developed specific student outreach flyers?
No.
And maybe a follow-up question would be, are there plans to?
That's something that's something we can possibly discuss as part of the work group, but right now, no, that has not been something that's been under discussion.
Thank you for the question, and we'll put that on the table at the work group.
Let's see. We have somebody else who, Dave, is citing MPP 63-502.2Q, saying that work-study income is exempt for CalFresh.
That's what I was fumbling through here trying to find. So I was in the process of Googling it because I kept thumbing through our.
So we'll send out a clarification with the follow-up email.
No, I'm sorry. There's nothing to clarify. It's clear right there. It says all payments. Okay, so it's talking about, if it's exempt from CalWorks, then we exempt it. So examples of excluded income include, but are not limited to, the following, right off the top, any college or work-study programs. I apologize for giving bad information out earlier. It is exempt income.
All right, you want to just say that one more time so everybody's clear?
Yeah. Work-study income, because it's exempted in Section 502.2Q, references that all payments excluded from consideration as income in the CalWorks program are also considered excluded from CalFresh. The first example that's cited in this list is any college work-study program. So the income from college work-study is exempt for CalFresh, and I sincerely apologize for giving the incorrect response earlier. It is exempt income. It does not count.
And you heard that on 314 today.
That's right. It's recorded. I'm putting a tab in my manual right here so I can always flip back to it.
Now, we have folks who are doing outreach in, of course, cities and counties where there are colleges and universities, and we have a question about whether a student who is not living at home and is 18 in college getting financial aid, and but the student's parents still claim her as a dependent on their taxes, and the question is whether that person can apply for CalFresh on her own.
If the student is not living at home?
That's correct. She's not living at home, but she is claimed as a dependent by her parents on their taxes.
If she's not living at home and she's not eating and preparing foods, preparing food separately or with her parents, the fact that the parents are claiming her as a dependent for their income tax has nothing to do with their CalFresh eligibility.
That's right. She's completely, she does not have to report her parents' income just because they're claiming her as a dependent.
Right. She probably doesn't even know it. In most
They
cases.
never asked that question anyhow.
Yeah.
There's nothing on the application that asks that question.
Yeah, there's.
I think there was something like in the 70s.
You have to meet the conditions of ineligibility to be ineligible, and that is not a condition of ineligibility.
Okay, thank you. Going back to work-study income actually, the question is, do you report work-study income as earned or unearned earned income? But you don't have to. You have to report it at all since it's exempt.
Yeah, it's best to report it And then if the worker for some reason tries to use it as income, then you should ask for a hearing, because sometimes they do that. But you should always report it, and then if they use it as income, ask for a hearing, and that will resolve it.
Right. Oh, when reporting it, though, is it reported as earned or unearned?
It's earned income, I think, yeah.
Again, I'm trying to bring up the SAR 7, our income reporting form, and my internet is not working.
Well, kick it.
So I don't know what it says on the SAR 7, but I think Kevin's right. It's always a good idea to report income. It would be reported as earned income if it's, unless it's something that's listed on the SAR 7 included. And again, I can't open our own form right now. I would say it should be reported, and the county should then exclude it.
Yeah. And if the county does not exclude it, ask for a hearing first, and then call us up, and we'll be glad to help you out.
All right. Dave, would you mind repeating the MPP number that you have now tabbed in your binder?
The exclusion? Yeah, it's MPP 63502.2Q.
You mean 63-502.
0.2.
Let's see. So the question is, will ACL 1570 state which programs will allow a student to qualify for CalFresh? So I think it's the question.
ACL 1570 has already been issued.
Right. Well, I guess maybe what they mean is, will there be some sort of an addendum that has a list of programs?
There would be more.
As they're identified through the work group, yes, there will be additional letters issued identifying additional programs as they're identified. That's part of the task of the work group, is to work with the community colleges, the state colleges, and the UC chancellor's offices to identify the various programs that they have.
Great, thank you.
Now the all-county information notice that I referenced earlier that will be coming out shortly does list all of the other current exemptions in regulation. And again, stresses to counties that they must thoroughly investigate with someone who's identified as a potentially ineligible student to find out if they meet any of the exemptions.
Great, thank you. So those are all of our questions. I think there are several were asked a number of times, but you've done a nice job of clarifying and restating. So I need to go through those. Is there anything anybody would like to add?
Keep the questions coming.
So in terms of follow-up, I will send out a follow-up email, like I mentioned before, that has the MPP citation, since it's been asked for a lot, Kevin's website, contact information, and a link to the recording of this webinar. Does that sound, am I missing anything?
And the link that I'll be sending you to ACL 1570.
Thank you, and the link to ACL 1570. So we don't have any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and close out our email. I want to thank our speakers for their presentations and also the great job they did fielding questions. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so it's just verifying that you've done your household